Hello, everyone. This is Michael Justin Lee, the president of the Ivy Dream. Welcome to another episode of Aspire, our podcast with students and former students of the most elite academic programs. Today, we're very happy to be joined by Machmud Makhmudov. He is from Uzbekistan originally, and he grew up in Atlanta. He obtained his bachelor's degree from Oberlin College and subsequently attended Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship. He is currently at Stanford studying in both the MBA and JD programs as a Knight-Hennessy Scholar. Hello, Mahmoud. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, good morning. First of all, thank you so much for having me. So I was born in Uzbekistan, but moved over to the United States when I was one. Grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, went to college out in Ohio. I spent a couple years working and before I went off to law school, and right now I'm in law school over in California at Stanford Law School.
Oh, we definitely want to get into that. But how were your formative years in the United States? Let's discuss this first.
Yeah, well, I'm an old man, so there's a lot to cover. But in some ways, I think I had at once a very typical and atypical experience growing up. Typical, what I mean by that is in the sense of, both my parents worked, had kind of middle class jobs. I played baseball growing up. It was kind of my way as an immigrant of integrating in the community. Obviously, I grew up in the South. So if you're a male of a certain age, you grow up knowing that you're either going to play baseball or football growing up. And I knew I didn't want to get knocked around more than I was going to be already. And so I picked baseball over football. And that experience playing baseball growing up really kind of centered my life and set me up for all the goals I had early on. So specifically, I really wanted to play college baseball. And so that was kind of the orienting principle around everything that I did, from waking up, going to work out, practicing after class, how I spent my summers, so on and so forth. And school, actually, ironically, I think maybe for this podcast was kind of a secondary concern on my mind at that point. But then once I got off to college, I went to Oberlin College. It's a liberal arts college in Ohio, rural Ohio. There was really where a lot of my kind of vantage point on what was possible in the world opened up. And I met a lot of people from both across the country and across the world from incredibly different backgrounds than me, and really started to build together some of the dreams for what I wanted to do in the future. From the atypical standpoint, I just say that, so I'm half Uzbek and half Uyghur. And for many people I meet in the United States, I'm often the first person of either of those backgrounds that they've ever met. And so the South is incredibly racially diverse, particularly in the place that I grew up, Gwinnett County, Georgia. But there are not a lot of people who are exactly like me. In fact, I think I know every single Uzbek person in the state of Georgia because I'm personally related to them. So in that ways, I think that there was a lot of kind of cultural disconnect. I didn't necessarily have a lot of people I could look up to as kind of role models who were doing things that I was interested in, who had the exact same background. But in some ways, honestly, I found that pretty liberating, just because I think if you have no set of expectations that's put on you from society, you have this sense of, well, I can do anything then, or at the very least, that's how I interpret it. So those are kind of the broad frameworks for how I grew up.
Mahmoud, that is a fascinating story. And when you got to Oberlin, what were your main intellectual learnings that have stuck with you?
Yeah, so coming into Oberlin, kind of like I mentioned, my primary focus was really just on playing baseball. But at the same time, just given the circumstances I had grown up in, I was always drawn to public service. I felt very lucky, number one, to come to the United States, but number two, to have the life that I had growing up. And so the feeling of wanting to give back was something that was important to me. I didn't really know what that would look like. My parents didn't push me to study a particular thing or to enter a particular profession, but I knew I wanted to give back in some way. So when I got to Oberlin, they had a very strong politics department there. And so both from the class standpoint, I just ended up stumbling into a couple different classes on American government and American politics that I was really fascinated by. But I think what really made it come alive for me were some of the more extracurricular opportunities that were offered there that I was able to take advantage of. So, for example, there's something called the Cole Scholarship offered at Oberlin, which basically you take a seminar on electoral politics in an American context. You go off in the summer and you work an internship, and you come back and you write a research paper based on the experiences you had. And so for my summer, I worked for a U.S. Senate race down here in Georgia, in my home state. So was at once I was able to take kind of the more theoretical academic work that I was studying in school, but married that to a context that I cared a lot about, just because this is my community, the place I grew up in. I knew I wanted to give back in some way, and so I began to see government policy and American politics as the mechanism by which I could really do that. So I got involved in other ways. I was on the student senate for a few years and had a lot of fun. Many war stories could tell from them, but in some ways, student government can get just as vicious as American politics is right now. So was able to do that, and then beyond kind of the political side, was also able to get into a pretty broad range of nonprofit and community service work. So I did some things with the city on their climate change mitigation plan. Ended up tutoring environmental science to a group of kids in kindergarten over at the local elementary school. Most of the time, they were more interested in kind of the butterflies flying around than they were what I had to say. But really just found a way to, number one, find that academics doesn't have to be something that just lives on a page. It's something that I think I found vocationally pathways to live out some of my values. And number two, really found that I liked being in positions of leadership, and that situations where I could kind of have an idea or a small team and help lead them to achieve some kind of project or lead some kind of change was something that I really liked, just because I found myself really drawn towards working with people who were different from me. And frankly, at Oberlin, if you walk around there when I was there, and probably still now, you'd find that most people had very different backgrounds from me, but that was something that I really appreciated and grew from.
I see. Well, did you have a particular career goal yet when you graduated from Oberlin?
Yeah, so kind of in a vague way that turned out to manifest in some ways. So I mean, growing up, like I said, I didn't really have a particular vision of what I wanted to do. Vaguely, I kind of thought of being an attorney, just because I saw that a lot of people that did some of the public service work that I was interested in had law degrees. And so when I was a little kid, I thought that judges were these people in black robes that did nice things for people. And so I thought, well, that's not too bad. I can do that. And then later on, I figured out that's not quite what happens, but we try as best as we can. So I had the idea vaguely of going to law school in the back of my head, but really didn't end up kind of going through with the process until much later. So right my senior year at Oberlin, I was very lucky. I was able to get the Rhodes Scholarship, which is an international scholarship to go and study at Oxford. I had applied for it because I didn't study abroad while I was at Oberlin. I was playing baseball and very involved with extracurriculars, so just didn't really have time to do that. But saw the opportunity at Oxford, number one, to go off and be abroad and see a bit of the world and have it paid for, which we always love. But number two, also to pursue a more specific graduate study in political theory. I had taken a lot of my coursework in American government, but didn't really have much of a theory background. And so wanting to kind of get deeper into the government space, I thought it would be good to spend some time getting into the more historical, theoretical underpinnings of a lot of the government work that I was interested in doing. So did that. And then at that point was thinking about going to law school straight out. I had a number of friends, some of my housemates, they were doing the same thing, but didn't feel quite ready to work. Didn't feel quite ready just to go straight through to law school. And so wanted to take some time to work and get some experience before then. So did a number of things, which I think in retrospect look like they all fit together really well. But truly at the time I was making these decisions, it felt quite, I don't want to say random, but just kind of the happenstance of life pulled together. So I was working in speechwriting for a bit. I loved writing, and so I really enjoyed that job. I moved out to Colorado for a bit to work on the U.S. Senate race. My candidate ended up leaving the race very randomly because the former governor of the state had gotten into the race, and so everyone else basically dropped out. So I learned very quickly that politics is not the most stable profession, but was able to go from there. And so at the time I was dating someone who was living in New York, and I wish I had like a big career plan that I could lay out how I kind of made all these decisions. But honestly, at the time, I wanted to be closer to her. And so I was looking for my next campaign to work on. It was 2020, so obviously an important year. So I was looking at East Coast campaigns that were near New York. There were two that were hiring for the policy role I was interested in. One was the Elizabeth Warren campaign. The other one was for President Biden. I applied to both. I got hired by President Biden. And at the time, the campaign was not looking so great, to put it generously. But I was over in Philadelphia working there for about a year and a half. And then fortunately, we were able to win and was able to get an offer to go and work at the White House to work at the COVID response right when we were in the middle of the pandemic. And so went off and did that for a year and a half before I actually ended up starting law school.
Yes.
But just
Mahmoud, may I jump in here to ask about specifically your time at Oxford?
Yeah.
Did your studies in political philosophy there contribute a lot or anything to your ultimate decision, which we'll get into? The audience will be getting right there shortly. Contribute much to your decision to go to law school eventually?
I think in some ways, yes and no. I think yes, from the standpoint that a lot of the theory, like a lot of the texts we were reading, formed the basis of a lot of the kind of foundational documents of the United States. I'm just speaking about the Constitution in particular, and so it was helpful just from getting a sense of, we have a variety of public policies. How is it that people have thought through for centuries how to properly structure government so that ultimately they can serve their people and people have good lives. And so I think there was some element of that, but at that point I was already kind of thinking about the law school path. And so I would say it was less instrumental as to the actual decision-making process. What I will say about my time there is I think that I learned a lot from school. Frankly, I think I learned more from the things outside of school, particularly just
really.
Yeah, I would just say just living abroad for the first time. It was literally when I got off the plane, it was my first time in Europe, first time in the UK. And all of a sudden I was in a very different academic environment and social environment. And so I think all of the friendships I built, trips I took, random people I met from across the world really helped me understand more about just human behavioral, cultural differences. And those things were all, not necessarily factors that led to me going to law school. But as I went off to work in the government, and now I'm in school and doing a variety of work, I think those experiences are really what stuck with me in terms of the long-lasting lessons and shaping how I think about the world.
Indeed. Mahmoud, do you think you would have followed the career path you subsequently have followed if you had not gone to Oxford on the Rhodes?
Wow, that's a good question. Just kind of like I outlined, so much of it was quite random. I was, not to be glib about it, but I was literally at some point chasing a girl in another way of thinking, which maybe is the longest, the oldest story told by man. But there was that element of it. There was also just the timing. I think with politics, so much of what I learned is that so much of it really is about timing. And I'm never going to pretend that I necessarily did that much to elect Joe Biden. There are kind of broader historical circumstances that I think brought us to that point. But a lot of it really was just me kind of being in the right place at the right time. At the same time, I'll say that I was prepared at those moments to take advantage of those opportunities. And so, I was trying to work hard. I was getting to know people. I was taking kind of risks on opportunities. At the time I joined the Biden campaign, we were not doing particularly well. I don't think a lot of people would have said we were going to win at that point. But it ended up working out. And so, Oxford, I think that 2-year buffer, I don't know, honestly, what I would have done had it not worked out. I would have gone into a similar type of job, but just given the cycle I've outlined about how random this all is, it could have taken me in 20 different directions. I'd say every small thing adds up in its own little way.
Yes, indeed. Now let's jump forward a little bit. You are now at Stanford in both the MBA and the JD programs. How did that decision to do that come about, and when was it?
Yeah, so the MBA portion of it was actually quite recent. So I came in just kind of like I talked about, thinking about law school for a while. I had seen a lot of people who I looked up to and roles that I was interested in, having taken that path and pursued that degree. So law school to me felt like a more natural path to go down. I had a lot of friends who were interested in similar things. They were doing the same thing at the same time. And so it was the kind of the thing where I had it in my head for so long, it felt strange and a bit scary, honestly, to not go down that path, which I can talk about later about the risk of doing that. And I think I've changed my mind a lot about that. But really, it was once I was there, I was lucky. I got into Stanford. I got the Knight-Hennessy Scholarship, which is a full ride there. And so while I was there, or I guess I am still there, but over the last 2 years, my first 2 years while I was there, um, really just started to hone in a little more on what was it specifically that I was good at and interested in doing. And so I knew I was a little less interested in pursuing kind of the formal elite path that's available to a lot of law students. And so thinking specifically doing a federal clerkship, doing things like law review, moot court, those were really interesting activities to me. I really wanted to focus more on kind of the policy side of things. And so my first year, I started a nonprofit, a political organization that basically organizes law students to do voter protection work for political campaigns. I thought I had a good background for that, just given all the work I'd done before. But maybe most importantly, it was just an opportunity that I saw that I knew I wanted to do this kind of work. I knew that there were a lot of my friends at different law schools across the country that wanted to do this kind of work, but there weren't really kind of institutional mechanisms to get folks plugged in on that. And so it was really my first time in my life that I was a bit entrepreneurial and just kind of saw the need and jumped into the hole and started this organization, recruited a board, had to raise some money, developed and lead all of our programming now. And so in a little over a year now, we have about 500 members at over 35 different law schools, involved in a number of states. And so that was just something I really enjoyed, because you started off with just an idea. I saw a problem that other people affirmed, like they recognized as an issue or a gap, and then was able to start something that went off. And then really when I decided to apply for the MBA, though, it somewhat stems from that. But there's another experience I had where this past January at Stanford Law School, you can extern for a quarter and get full credit. So basically what you do there is you work full time in a public service capacity, and that counts as class credit. So I was working down at the state capitol here in Georgia, and I was serving as the chief of staff to a state rep who I was close with. And there, what I was doing was basically helping manage the team, very small team in Georgia. The state government is not particularly well funded. And so everything that we did was kind of from our campaign funds. And so obviously every member has different capacity in terms of what they can do with that. But it was really my first time kind of doing that entrepreneurial work of leading a small team, but from the official government side. And I think what I took away from that was that what really brought me joy was kind of this more entrepreneurial aspect, or I'm sorry, perspective to social issues, where I kind of see a problem, I can get together a small group of people to address this thing that no one else is really doing, start the team, get the organization growing, and then go off and do the next thing. And so thinking about what I really wanted from my life, I just wanted to kind of take that risk. I felt it was more authentic to who I was and my skill set. And frankly, it made me happier than just kind of sitting at a desk all day. And so at the time, I was taking classes over at the business school of Stanford's. The GSB, the Graduate School of Business, is kind of known for being a very environment for social entrepreneurship. I think to know a lot of people over there. And so it felt to me very natural to kind of look at the MBA and say, okay, I'm lucky because with the joint degree program, it only adds 1 year to the time I was going to take there anyway. Because of Knight-Hennessy, the scholarship I got, most of it would be funded. And then by taking that extra year, I could really throw myself more fully into the resources that they have around social entrepreneurship at the business school. And so that was something I did this a couple months ago and actually got accepted about 2 months ago. So we'll be beginning the MBA portion of the program this fall.
And Mahmoud, may take a step back. How did you prepare for the Knight-Hennessy? I'm aware of it. Oh, everyone is. And it's a very difficult scholarship to obtain. Again, how did you prepare for it while you're already immersed in law school and the organization you founded? Yeah. That's quite a lot to do, let alone talking about the LSAT.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a lot. So you can apply, there are different points at which you can apply for Knight-Hennessy. So I applied concurrently with my law school application. So this was the fall of 2021, because I started in fall 2022. So I did those things at the same time. And in some ways, I think that made it easier just because I was thinking a lot about why I wanted to go to law school. Obviously, you have to craft the essays. just kind of explaining a vision of what it is you want to do with your life, but also who are you and what is it that you've done? How does that all feed into this vision for who you're going to become in the future and what you want to do in the future? And so in some ways that I think doing both really helped. I'll also say that I think I appreciated Knight-Hennessy as an application, and now as a community, now that I'm in it. I think what they really look for is people who can be authentic to themselves and aren't afraid to take some level of risk, and maybe pursuing a path that others aren't willing to take. And so, honestly, I think I had the benefit of having it worked for a while before. I had a clearer sense of what I wanted to do, but I think maybe more importantly, I knew what I didn't want to do. And so I could speak quite specifically to what my vision for my future would look like at that point. And a lot of it is effectively the same stuff I'm talking about and doing now. A lot of policy work, focused on, obviously trying to do things across the country, but really focused on my home state of Georgia and the South broadly. And so doing that application, to me, it felt quite natural just because I was basically just saying what I wanted to do. And I think a lot of the times people who are applying for these things have this sense of, there's like a perfect model of a kind of person they're looking for, but I found that's not really the case. And if you end up trying to say something that's not you, people can smell it. They'll either smell it in the interview or they'll do it in the essay or whatever point, but you can't fake who you really are for that long. And so in that way, I just try to tell the truth about who I was and what I went to, and luckily it worked out.
I see. Did it help preparing your Knight-Hennessy at the same time you were preparing your Stanford law application?
Yes, because in some ways, particularly for Stanford, because I had written a portion of my personal statement about why Stanford, and a big one of the sub essays that they have for Knight-Hennessy is literally why is coming to Stanford going to help you. So I've done a lot of reading about the school. Had spoken to a couple of people who were over there just to get a really kind of more granular sense of what the place was all about. And at the time I was applying, I mean, Stanford was my number one choice. Primarily for cultural reasons. It seemed like, and now that I'm there, I can definitely affirm it is the kind of place where you have a lot of hardworking people. You have a lot of people who are ambitious in conventional ways, but also in unconventional ways. And I think that there's less pressure there relative to some more law schools to kind of follow a particular path. And that was something that was very attractive to me. And so that was very much at the forefront of my mind. And I think Knight-Hennessy honestly was looking for kind of the same thing. So I found that the two fit together very well.
Oh, indeed. May I ask specifically, having obtained a Rhodes, I can assume that your undergraduate grades were the top. How did you do on the LSAT, and how did you prepare for that while you were in the midst of working in the Biden administration?
Yeah, so the LSAT journey is not a fun one, as I'm sure anyone listening going through it can attest to. But so I actually ended up taking it twice. I took it once my senior year of college because the LSAT's good for 5 years. And I knew at that point I was at Oberlin, I was in school, wasn't quite certain what was going to happen next. I hadn't yet gotten Rhodes, but I knew that whatever I did, it was probably going to be a busier time. And so I'd done most of my credits, so I was able to take lighter course loads for the last 2 semesters. And so really put a lot of time into studying for the LSAT. But not enough time because I didn't do particularly well my first go around. So I got a 163, which, is a fine score for many schools, but it was definitely not competitive for the schools I was looking at. So a year later, I was at Oxford already. A strange thing about the schedule there is that it's you have very long breaks. And so you effectively have 2 months of class and then you have a few weeks off. Then you have 2 more months of class. Then you have, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks off. And so you have these long breaks in the middle. And then the summer is a 4-month break. And so in the summer, I worked a job, but then I had about 2 months at the end where I was not working. And so I used that time to just study for the LSAT. So this was my second take a year after I graduated from college. I approached it very differently that time. Previously, what I had done was kind of go through, there's these test prep books I had gotten for free online. I'd gone through those and then kind of haphazardly did practice sections from tests. But obviously that didn't work out for me. So I took it much more seriously the second time. The second time, basically for a span of 6 weeks, during the weekdays, I took a full length practice test in the morning at the exact time it was going to be administered. I'm an old man, so I took this a while ago. This was September 2017. So back in the day, we had to do on paper and show up in person at a specific time at a particular place and the whole thing. So I knew it was going to be at a particular time that I had not, or at a particular time and at a particular place I hadn't been to before. It was going to be, I think, in a Hyatt somewhere in New York. And so basically what I did is I took a full length practice test in a different part of the library that was closest to me at the time. At the exact same time every day, I would go off and eat lunch and then come back, review all my answers and see what it was that I got wrong. And for all the ones I got wrong, I would literally just get a blank piece of paper and redo them over and over until I understood what it was. And luckily, I was able to find a set of free videos on YouTube through a channel called 7Sage, where they kind of explain all of the different answer questions. And so, I did that for 6 weeks. It was really not fun, but towards the end, I ended up scoring a 172 in that take, and I felt comfortable with that. And that was good enough to get me in. So never thought about it since then.
Yeah, I assume no one wants to recreate that experience. Mahmoud, by the way, I had a very similar experience studying for the GMAT. Now, you got nothing on me in terms of age, but I'm from New York, and back in those days, you could just walk into the New York Public Library, spend as much time as you want, anywhere you want. And I did that 9 to 5 for the 3 weeks prior to my GMAT taking. So and as you did, I started exactly at the hour at which the GMAT would be administered. So there's a commonality there.
Yeah. No, it's now they got the young kids. They got it easy. You can take it when you want. You can take it at home. You do it on your laptop.
These whippersnappers got no idea how good they got it. And now, Mahmoud, you're at Stanford Law. I don't doubt you're doing absolutely wonderful. In addition to starting your organization, you mentioned that you already had the Knight-Hennessy. Did you necessarily have to start at a particular year?
Because I applied concurrently, first I'll say I wanted to go that year, frankly, because I was ready to go. I was quite tired. It had been 3 straight years of kind of working for Joe Biden in different capacities between the campaign and the White House, and they're very intense jobs. Most people last about a year and a half in the White House, so that was kind of exactly the point at which I left. But yeah, I was quite tired. I also felt like I just didn't have much agency over my life. I mean, I felt very grateful to be doing the work I was doing. It was so I was on the COVID team, so we're helping distribute vaccines across the world, and so that was very gratifying work. But it was just really exhausting. And at the end of the day, I was, fundamentally the lowest person on the totem pole, and so I wanted to kind of get back closer to what I felt was an authentic way of me living out my values. And for me, I think that meant starting to carve a pathway to coming back towards the South, doing things on my own time and my own accord that weren't dictated by a global pandemic or an election. And so I was quite committed to applying and then attending the subsequent year, kind of more functionally. My LSAT was also about to expire. I was at the 5-year point, and so I didn't want to take the test again. So that was kind of it. And then with Knight-Hennessy, if you do get accepted to it, and because I had applied it concurrently, it was the same time I got accepted to law school, you do have to attend that cycle. So I didn't really think twice about that. I was ready to go, and I think it was the right time for me. So basically, Knight-Hennessy covers 3 years total. So because the joint degree is 4 years, they're covering my 3rd year, which is a blend of the law school and the business school. And then for the 4th year, I'm relying on financial aid from both the law school and the business school, as well as some external scholarships. But yeah, so Knight-Hennessy tops out at 3 years.
Mahmoud, let's turn to living in Stanford. You, by then, had living experience at Oberlin and Oxford. How, in contrast, have you found but living at Stanford, what would you say about that area?
Yeah, I mean, it's a gorgeous place. I mean, so I hadn't spent really a lot of time in California before then, and I was a little hesitant, to be honest, just because it was so far from everyone I knew. All my family basically is in Georgia. A lot of my friends were in DC or along the East Coast, and so there was a bit of an apprehension in terms of being that far. On the other hand, at that point, I'd been in Colorado. Also, I'd been in Philadelphia for Biden. I'd been in DC, And I think something that I really learned about myself was that, I always had this vision, this dream of coming back to Georgia, and I still want to do that. But I also grew to appreciate just like how incredible different parts of the country and the world are. And I think I found a lot of joy being able to travel to different places. And so in part, I was excited to go to Stanford in particular, just because it was so different as a place than anywhere else I'd been. And so I thought, if my next chapter is really where I'm going to come back to Georgia and kind of put down my roots, it doesn't hurt to have one more stint where I can kind of explore and see something new. And so, yeah, I mean, California, in a lot of ways, it feels like a different country sometimes. And the climate is very different. You walk outside every day and it's sunny and beautiful, and palm trees everywhere. Palo Alto is situated such that, there's a beach about 40 minutes away. San Francisco is about 50 minutes away. There's a lot of different hiking trails and mountains really nearby. And so I really like it. It's a slower place. It's a really great place if you're into the outdoors and kind of being active and being outside. I remember when I got to campus, I said, if I don't leave here in the best shape of my life, I've done something wrong. So I still have a little more progress to make on that front. But yeah, it's been incredible. And I think I'll say the physical environment does lend itself to the tenor of the social environment as well. I know you're asking about the social life. And I just found it to be, I think, especially coming from DC, it was much less of a stressed place. People work hard, but they're not kind of doing the overly competitive, grinding atmosphere that you often find on the East Coast. And just kind of where I was in my life entering at that point, I found that really refreshing, and it allowed me to really focus on who it was I wanted to be and what I wanted to get out of law school. And I think that's been incredible so far.
Yes, I want to get into that. But first, in decades past, all the major law schools had a reputation, business schools for that also, had a reputation for being very tough, very cutthroat. Um, how are you finding that? Has that changed a lot?
That's a really good point, because I think it's something that a lot of people, I didn't know any lawyers growing up. I grew up in a place where the richest people around were kind of like car dealership owners. And so we didn't really have white collar professionals who were attorneys or bankers or whatever it may be. So that cultural adjustment was quite different for me, less at Stanford, but more so earlier on. I think at places like Oberlin, at Oxford, in DC, where you had a lot of that really cutthroat environment. And just to be honest and kind of vulnerable, like it really stressed me out. I remember there was just one moment where I was in the office and I felt so overwhelmed. And I was just like, I've never felt this like ill physically. And it wasn't necessarily that anything was happening with me physically. I was just so stressed with all the work. And I think particularly coming from the South, where you're in an environment where people, I think, kind of go out of their way to be friendly. There's a lot of diversity and people kind of live together in a more or less harmonious way. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. But yeah, I think going to the cutthroat environments was quite tough. And I had a lot of friends who went straight from undergrad or straight from Oxford over to law school, kind of followed their paths, and we would go over to visit them. And I just remember them feeling so stressed. I was like, what am I doing going on this path, following you? I don't want to live this way. And so Stanford, I mean, from the moment I visited, but also just talking to people who were there, I could feel it was different. I do think the physical environment plays a role in that, but I also think they kind of select for people who, I'll put it this way, I think like take themselves not so seriously, but take their work seriously. And I think that's been great, just in terms of, it's also a small class and there's a lot of diversity in terms of what people do. I have friends who are pursuing kind of the more conventional routes in terms of wanting to do a clerkship and so on and so forth. And, I that's the right thing for them. And I definitely support them in that. I have other friends that are like starting businesses. Some of them wanting to go into writing. And so just very different places. And I think because it's small, there's less of a sense of competition for people. For the most part, there's not really that many people you're competing against who want to do the exact same thing as you from Stanford. And then we benefit from it being Stanford and people kind of knowing the name and taking it seriously. And so I think that all contributes to being less of a competitive environment.
That is indeed quite a difference. Well, now, Mahmoud, you've been there 3 years. You have a fourth to go. Have your goals changed or narrowed?
Yeah. So I think I put it this way. I think my values have not changed. What I want to see happen in the world has not changed. I think how I want to go about them has changed. So specifically what I mean that, I thought I would spend really a lot of time kind of, maybe working at a law firm for a bit, potentially running for office, going into government in one form or another. Uh, and I think all of that work is important, but I think just kind of taking a step back, anyone looking at what's happening both in America and across the world seems like there's a lot that's wrong with our institutions. And I think that there's a lot of lack of responsiveness that people feel towards the problems that they're facing and what they're seeing every day, and our capacity from the government and businesses and nonprofits and so on and so forth to respond to those things adequately. And I think we're in a moment where we need people who, number one, are willing to speak freely and authentically to what they see happening and what they're experiencing and what their community is experiencing, but also have a bit of a different vision for how to approach those things, just because doubling down on the same thing we've always done is clearly not working out for us. So I think the path I see for myself now is I would love to find myself in a capacity where I can work on some of the policy issues that I care most about. And so I haven't spoken much about this, but really the policy things I care most about are issues related to infrastructure, transportation, the environment, housing, kind of built environment issues. There's a lot of really interesting work happening at a pretty quick pace in the private sector along those lines. And so, there's a number of different funds that kind of invest in startups that are in this space innovating. And I think specifically because I've been at Stanford, which has such a great ecosystem for sustainability, for entrepreneurship, for general kind of tech startup scene, I've met a lot of those people doing a lot of that exciting work. And I think what that changed my mind about was kind of, wow, like you guys are actually moving the ball in a lot of things at a time when the federal government, in some ways is doing good stuff, in some ways is very slow. We have a train that they're supposed to be building in California from LA to San Francisco. I think they've been planning for about 15 years and we don't have a single foot of track down yet. While at the same time, there's a lot of people doing things in the private sector that are thinking about how to get people mobile and moving around the country in quick and efficient ways that are moving a little more quickly. So what I'd like to do is spend some time in the private sector working on those issues from that perspective, but then still at the end of the day, go back into government, because I think that we're not going to be able to take on any of these challenges if the government, which is kind of in some ways has the only authority over a lot of these issues, doesn't change and adapt in that way as well. So what that looks like, honestly, past kind of a 5-year timeline, I don't really know, just because I think I'm very attuned to the fact that technology is changing very quickly, society is changing very quickly, and so I think anyone who thinks they can project out that far ahead is kind of deluding themselves. But I know what kind of skill set I want to develop. I know the people I want to be around, and I kind of know immediately what it is that I'd like to get into. And so that's how I think about kind of how I values and plan have changed.
Mm-hmm. Mahmoud, can I infer that you have interest in running for office?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll put it this way. It's something I think is really, 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 really important. You look, we had the presidential debate the other day, and I think a lot of people walked away from that feeling like, how is it that we've come to this situation where these are the options that we have at this moment to lead on all these important issues? Neither of the candidates talked about artificial intelligence in 90 minutes. It's going to change everything for all of us in the next 5 to 10 years. We have a climate crisis. We have obviously issues with our border and migration, not just here, but across the world. In some ways, government is really the only one that can work on those things. It's not like there's a private sector solution to the military or the border, right? So I think it's important to have leadership there that can do it. I will say, on the other hand, it's a tough life. And I think I've seen firsthand how precarious it all is and how random a lot of the timing. Just to go back to the timing point I made earlier. You can be well prepared, you can have a good plan, you can kind of get everything together that you need to, but it still doesn't work out. And I think for me, it's important first and foremost to feel like whatever job I'm doing, I can actually make an impact. I think right now, where I am in law school, where I am in my career, I don't think it would make sense, nor do I really have the desire to run for office right now. I don't really see that window for another 5 years, to be honest, at least. Could change down the line, but I think if I came to a point where I saw an opportunity where I was living, I thought I had the right skill set, and I thought I could actually accomplish something once I won, then I would do it. But something I found a lot of joy in just through the political organization I founded is kind of really supporting other people. I think a lot of times we we focus on the individuals as politicians, but it's fundamentally a team sport, and you have to have other people who share your vision you can work alongside with to accomplish something. And so I've been supporting a lot of other people running for office that kind of share my values. I'll just give an example. One of our members from the organization I started, he's now the nominee for the most competitive state Senate race in the whole state of Georgia. He's someone that just graduated from law school 2 months ago, and is running very competitively and on pace to do well. And so really seeing that he's the kind of person that he's an Indian American, his parents are immigrants, grew up in Georgia. And so very much the kind of person that shares my values, and I found a lot of joy kind of in supporting him and other people in similar positions. So whether I end up running or not, I think I definitely want to be involved kind of in the process throughout my life.
Indeed. That's wonderful, and wonderful for your classmate. Mahmoud, what would you say the kind of life you've lived would define success for you?
That is a good question. I think it looks different for everyone, but maybe if there was a fundamental through line, I'd say, did you do as much as you could with what you were given? And I think I've been very lucky to go to all these fancy schools and have some cool jobs. But at the end of the day, if you don't turn that into something that's tangible into other people, then I think it was kind of a waste. One of my best friends from high school, I actually remember our graduation night of high school. He had written me one of those senior letters you give to your friends when you're going away. And he had this line I'll never forget. It said, "You've been given too much to waste it all on somebody as unimportant as yourself." And it's kind of a strangely profound thing to say from like an 18-year-old. But I want to always feel like I'm giving back in some way. And in some ways I measure that less over the span of a lifetime and really over the span of a day. There's a lot of work I've been involved in, not just on the political front, but similar to some of the work you do in terms of helping make higher education more accessible. That's personally very important to me. And so I think there are small ways to live that you can feel as if you've been whole in living out your values on a day-to-day basis. And so I think if you do that every day and then you get to the end, then that's a pretty good way of doing it. I'll also say one more thing that I think is kind of more particular to me. And I'd spoken a bit about how I had grown up, kind of with a strange random identity in a very strange random place of the country. But something that I think that gave me, which, I think is a bit of advantage over others, is that I've been able to just meet people from the whole world, from super different backgrounds, even just here in Atlanta, people from incredibly different racial backgrounds, familial backgrounds. And I think being on the outside a lot felt hurtful to me growing up because I felt like I didn't fit in. But over time, I think it gave me a special insight into how different people think and fundamentally understanding that we're all just people and we want the same things. And so I think to the extent that I can play a role in helping people recognize themselves in one another, and in particular people who look and act and think differently than they do, then I kind of take that on as one of my missions. And so if I feel like I've been able to do it at the end of my life, then I'll count that as a success.
Rockwood, this has been a truly inspiring story. I know that our audience will gain a lot from listening to what you've told us. I'd like to personally wish you the very best in everything that you will be aiming to do going forward. I'll have your name in mind as I hope to read about you in the headlines.
Hopefully for
everyone.
Good reason.
Yes, indeed. I expect that to be the case. Everyone, today we were very pleased to be joined by Machmud Makhmudov, currently at Stanford in both the MBA and the JD programs, and having shared with us his story about growing up, his time at Oxford, and what he plans to do going forward. Mahmoud, I can't thank you enough. You've provided us and our audience with a tremendous amount of information.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and thankful to you for all the work you're doing. I know we have a lot of similar values in terms of making sure that different educational opportunities are available to everyone. And so thank you for having me.